But first, what a turbulent week for major media companies, with CNN, Netflix, Disney, and Twitter all left spinning with no stopping in sight. Here at CNN, new ownership decided to shut down the CNN Plus streaming service less than a month after it was launched by the previous management team. The U-turn was front-page news, stunning news, and painful news for everyone involved. Years of development possibly down the drain. Some of the shows may never be seen. Hundreds of staffers may be laid off, though the company is trying to place many of them in new jobs. Amid these bruising headlines, folks are trying to make sense of it, and some partisans are leaping to predictable talking points about politics. But the truth is, this was a corporate move. This CNN Plus service was doomed because of the timing of a merger and clashing streaming strategies. The new owner of CNN, Warner Bros. Discovery, has big plans to combine multiple streaming platforms to make one big challenger for Netflix. And speaking of which, this week, Netflix's first quarter earnings came out. An incredible snag. Subscriber numbers actually declining after the pandemic surge. Its stock taking a nosedive at the news. Lots of questions about Netflix and whether it might actually be a takeover target now. Let's talk about it all, plus Disney and more, with our panel of experts here. We have Axios media reporter Sarah Fisher, Mara Schiavocampo, host of the podcast Run Tell This, and a former correspondent at NBC and ABC, and our senior media reporter Oliver Darcy, also with us. Sarah, you broke news. First of all, you were a guest on the first episode of my CNN Plus show, so thank you. Then you broke news about the service being doomed. So let's be very transparent about it. What did you learn this month, and what led to the closure of CNN Plus?
Yeah, well, CNN executives had been plotting this for 2 years. But then in 2021, we found out that CNN's parent company, Warner Media, would merge with Discovery. And what we come to find is that after CNN's head, Jeff Zucker, exited the company, resigned in shock in February, executives at Discovery were starting to question whether or not CNN Plus fit in with their strategy. Discovery, as you mentioned, wanted to create one big streaming service. They wanted it to be general entertainment. CNN Plus is a smaller subscription service. And so I think ultimately they took a look at the books after the merger completed on April 8th. They thought this is too expensive. It might not ever get to profit on time, and it doesn't fit in with what we want to do. It's better to cut it off now than to keep it lagging for months while they decide.
All right, Oliver, you and I work here, so we'll save you. Mara, next to you as an outsider looking at this. What's your perspective on this and what it means for the news business?
Well, it's certainly shocking from the outside looking in because of the fanfare that preceded this launch. We're talking about estimated $300 million that were spent, huge marketing and promotion, big names that were brought in, Chris Wallace, Audie Cornish, Eva Longoria. And so it was shocking that this happened so abruptly. But at the end of the day, this is a business decision. And, there are debates about whether or not journalism should be treated as a business versus a public service, but it is a business for better or for worse. And so to your point, as a new owner, do you come in, see something that's not working, and continue to throw good money after bad? And it appears that they made the decision not to continue doing that they did not think this was in the best long-term interest for the company. But again, from the outside looking in, I am very curious to see what they're going to do with all of this talent. I mean, these are huge names with huge followings. Where are they going to go?
I had a source say to me this week, everyone's a product of their history. And the new management team at Discovery, their history includes some niche streaming services that did not do well, right, Sarah? They launched streaming services that were kind of like CNN Plus, although not the same, and they failed. And so Discovery does not believe in that model. And it's hard to fathom as a CNN employee, worried about my colleagues being laid off, that this was simply about, corporate strategy. But that's what it was.
Yeah, that's what it was. And there's also a differing view on whether or not it was successful. People inside CNN...
Well, wasn't it too soon to know?
Well, that's the argument, right? Because this was sort of unprecedented, we've never really had a subscription news and video app. People wanted to see what the precedent this would set. We're never going to really find out.
Right.
We know that in the 2.5 weeks since launch, it got about 150,000 subscribers, paid subscribers. Now, some people in the news business have been saying to me, hey, that's pretty good.
Yeah.
But the challenge is the money they spent to get those paid subscribers. You're talking $300 million of investment to date. The plan was to spend $1 billion over the next 4 years with the hope of getting to profitability after 4 years. The question, Brian, becomes if people are paying, $5.99 or $2.99 for that, lifetime membership, is it ultimately going to be worth the spend?
Right.
And that was the challenge. I think Discovery took a look at this and they said, we don't think it's ultimately going to be worth the spend, even though that's a good number of subscribers for now.
Right.
It might not be a good business move.
So they say they will focus on the core business, this channel as well as CNN Digital. Oliver, what's next for CNN?
for CNN as a channel. I mean, Chris Licht is coming in. He's the new president of CNN. And there's a lot of things on his plate, right? He has a new 9 p.m. host he has to appoint. He has to figure out what to do with the talent that was brought in for CNN Plus. And also, there are hundreds of employees who potentially could be laid off. And so he's going to try to find, in the town hall, he was talking about trying to absorb some of those people into the organization.
Right.
And so he's got work to do if he's going to, he's got hundreds of people. So he's got work to do if he's going to try to find them other places inside CNN.
Now, is this story, Sarah, related to the Netflix story? Because it's a coincidence that CNN Plus was shut down on the same week that Netflix had that horrible earnings report. But is there a similarity in the story about the streaming competition?
Yes, definitely. During the pandemic, there was a huge boom in subscription streaming. People were willing to put their money out. But what we found is that that market might actually not be as big as we once thought it was. We might have hit a point of saturation. Over and over, analysts have found that consumers are willing to spend around $40 a month on subscription services. But that hasn't increased.
That's
even
why
as
your
the
headline
supply.
here says this is a sea change for streaming.
It is, because even though the supply has increased, the demand has not. Budgets have not increased. And we're now at a point of inflation. Consumers are starting to be more wary. As a result, we're seeing an introduction and a rise of ad-supported streaming services. That's the exact opposite of what CNN Plus was. CNN Plus didn't have ads.
Right, no ads, right.
It was just subscriptions. Netflix, after many years of saying we don't want to put ads on our service, has finally come out this week and said, look, if we want to expand the number of subscribers, we have to include an ad-supported tier. And by the way, that's what everyone has done. Disney
Right.
Plus is now doing it. Obviously Discovery, HBO Max, you name it. They're all putting ads on the service. That's the big change here. It's no longer going to be ads-free subscription everything because people just don't have enough money to pay for that.
So you mentioned Disney. Disney also in the news this week. A lot of turbulence there. Florida Governor Ron DeSantis helping strip away Disney's special tax status in Florida. Oliver, what's the headline? What's the takeaway from this? Making Disney into a political lightning rod.
Well, it makes sense for Ron DeSantis, right? He loves being in these cultural wars because it elevates him to the national spotlight. But Disney is the opposite. Disney does not want to be in any conflict. They want to be the brand that's for everyone, for conservatives, for liberals, for everyone. And so this is a huge problem for Disney because they intentionally try to avoid conflict. Ron DeSantis loves conflict. And so, and I hate to say it, but right now I think that he's actually winning because
he's benefiting.
Because he's being elevated every night. They're talking about this on Fox. He was on Fox on Friday with, I believe, Tucker Carlson. So he's elevated as the GOP leader, basically.
Yeah, leader in waiting.
Even more perhaps over Trump. He's getting a lot of attention. And so, it's in his interest to keep this war going. It's certainly in Disney's interest not to. And I think that's why the company's staying silent and hoping this maybe just goes away.
They really are staying silent. More on Disney in a moment. Here's the next company on our list, Twitter. Mara, Elon Musk, what he's going to do with Twitter. He has tweeted this morning, Elon Musk, and he posted, what did he post? Moving on, ... A very cryptic tweet. Then later in the morning, he said he was just referencing his feud with Bill Gates. But he did prove, Mara, this week that he has the funding to buy Twitter and take it over if he really pushes hard to do it.
Yeah, it's hard to know when exactly to take him seriously because he is so eccentric. And so when this idea came up, we know that this would cost him billions of dollars. Of course, he has a lot of money, but this would be an extremely expensive proposition. So it was hard to know if he was serious about it. But now that he's presented a plan for actually doing this financially, you do have to give it a little bit more weight. I think what's most interesting are some of the proposed changes that he says he would make to the platform if he took over. Some good and some not so good. I mean, the one thing that he says he wants to do is get rid of a lot of these reforms of, kind of moderating speech. And I think the last thing Twitter needs is less policing because we know that there are limits to free speech. There's that famous example of yelling fire in a crowded theater. So I don't know that less regulations in terms of what people can say is a good idea on Twitter. But the one thing that I do think is really appealing is being more transparent about the algorithm, how the algorithm works, and maybe even eliminating it altogether, where you go back to a chronological feed, because that would really address some of the issues with the echo chamber, with people just kind of reinforcing their own beliefs without any exposure to different beliefs or views or information.
That's a great setup for our next block. So thank you, panel. Stick around. More with the panel in a little bit.